Will Banks is learning to use the dark room, and he's fantastic. Ben and Maria have moved into the house, and they are traffic. Molly is home, and she's being da, da, unbearable. Well, as they say, 2 out of 3 is bad. I suppose you can really blame Molly for being a pain. She was awfully sick. No one knows that better than I do. I don't think the sign of her lying her lying there in all the blood will ever go out of mine. But apparently she got used to being the center of attention in the hospital. Who wouldn't? With all those specialists around, still here she is at home and supposedly well, or why would they have discharged her from the hospital and she act as if everyone should still be at her back and call? And my parents put up with it. As the amazing thing. Could I have a tuna fish sandwich? Asked Molly at lunchtime. The day after she came home, she was lying on the couch in the kitchen in a pose like playmate of the month, except that she was wearing jeans and sweatshirts. Do you want to next? Really? My mother asked her, securing to get the bread and mayonnaise. For peace sake, do you want rash? 2 months ago, she would have said, make it yourself, madame. That's what she would still say to me. And after all that, Molly didn't even eat the sandwich. She came to the table and 2 fish and then drifted back to the couch and said that wasn't hungry after all. Are you sure you're feeling alright, dear? Asked Mom. Quit bugging me, will you? Said Molly, and she stormed off to our room, slammed the door with pair open again. Molly will never learn that the door to our room is totally unrest and tantrum, and took a nap for the rest of the afternoon. Molly never used to be like that. I used to be like that sometimes, and I hate myself when I was. Now Molly is that way, and I find myself hating her, or at least hating what hating her, or at least hating what has happened to her to make her different. My parents don't say a word. That's different too. In the past, when one of us was grossy, my mother always said and did things that were both understanding and funny, so that we would start to laugh, and whatever was making us ill would just disappear in a comfortable way, or that would be buried. He says he doesn't have time to work on rudeness. Shave up, he would say, and we would shave up because he didn't leave any choice. But now Mom doesn't hunker and taste when Molly is offered. That doesn't lay down the law. Instead, Mom gets worried and confused, which makes things worse. That gets tense and silent and goes off to his story without saying anything. It's as if an upsetting stranger had moved in with us, and no one knows what to do about it. Part of why Molly is being so obviously, I think, is because she doesn't look very good, and it was always important to Molly to look pretty. But she lost weight while she was in the hospital because the food was full, she says, so that now her face is thinner than it used to be and more fair. The fairest, I guess, is because she had to have the blood transfusion. And it probably takes the red blood cells a while to build up again. Roast over for Molly, her hair is falling out. That's because of the pills she has to take. My parents said one of the side effects is that your hair falls out. I told her that there might be medicine with worse side effects, like making your nose fall off, but no one thought that was very funny. My mother told her that when she is able to stop taking the medicine after a while, her hair will grow back thicker and curlier than it was before. But when Mom said that, Molly just stayed great, very secretly, and kept staring at her calm, full of blonde trend. Then Mom said that if it got worse, they would buy her wing, and Molly said, oh, close, and stormed off to our bedroom. So things are kind of difficult at our house now. Molly can't go back to school until she gained a little weight and gets her color back. She says she won't go back to school anyway if her hair keeps falling out. Mom and Dad don't say much about school. They are depressed about the whole thing. I can tell. It will just take time. If we're all patient and wait, everything will be the same as it used to be. I know. Will Banks is very kind to Molly. He comes to the house three evenings a week to walk in the dark room, and he always brings something for her, a library book to read or a candy bar, some little thing like that. One night he brought a handful of cereal that he had found behind his house. The first ones of spring and Molly was thrilled. It was the first time I'd seen her really happy about something for a long time. Oh, Will, she said softly. They're beautiful. She held them against a cheek and loved the softness like a kitten. We were sitting in the kitchen and I took a small vase and ran some water into it. No water, Max said Will. If you put fancy willows in water, they will blossom and then die. Just put them in the vase alone and they'll stay beautiful forever. There's so much I don't know. I gave Molly the vase without water and arranged the fancy willow in it. She took them up to our room and put them on the table beside her bed. That night, after we were in bed and Molly was already asleep, I looked over, and the moonlight was across the table and across Molly. Behind her, on the wall, was the shadow of sea willows. It's not surprising that Will knows so much about so many things, because he has an incredible memory. When we began working together in the darkroom, I showed him first the basic procedure for developing film. I only showed him once, then he did it himself, developing a role there. He had shot up his truck and his dog, using his one camera to make sure it was working properly before he gave it to me. He remembered everything, the proportion of criminal, the timing right down to the second. His negative were perfect. The pictures weren't great because, as he said, he'd been just fooling around wanting to get the feel of the camera again, but they were technically perfect, developed exactly right, and his immeasurably curious. When I could see that he'd learned to develop film probably, I wanted to go on to the next step, printing the picture. But Will said, wait, what would happen if when I was developing the film, I purposely made the chemicals too warm? What would happen if I agreed to them less or more? And what if I had underexposed the film? Man, when I took the picture, couldn't I compensate for that when I developed the film? Maybe by prolonging the developing time. I thought for a minute. Those things had never occurred to me, and they should have. Of course, you could compensate. I never tried. I said thinking, but I bet you could. There must be a book that tells how. Let me, he interrupted me. He's also impatient, I've found, and very independent. Oh, the heck with books, Mac. Let's figure it out for ourselves. This experiment. Someone must have figured it out once in order to write a book. Why can't we go the same thing? So we did that. Was Molly light, and on Tuesday and Wednesday is of us shot several rolls of film purposely and exposing and overexposing them. One Wednesday night we developed them is one a different way. We changed the temperature on some, the developing time on some, the amount of aggregation on some, and we did it. We figured it out exactly how to compensate for all sorts of things, how to build up contrast, how to reduce it. We felt like a couple of miracle workers when we came out of the dark room after 3 hours. Mom was in the kitchen working on the quiet. She looked up and laughed. You two sounded like a couple of crazy people in there, she said, shouting at each other. I giggled. We had been shouting. Don't leave it in the developer so long, you moron. I have shouted at Will. You will ruin it. I'm trying to ruin it. Will had Will back, so I can figure out how to do it perfectly. How can you learn anything if you won't take a risk? And I was supposed to be teaching him. Lydia will explain to Mom the night, sitting down to have a cup of tea before he went home. Genius disregard the boundary of Professionally. Genius is for me, it's just shouting is reductive. Mom laughed again, sniffed off the truth and the complicate a red and white stripe, scared from a suit I wore when I was 3 years old. She like Will. Well, she said, I've been living with creative genius long enough that I should know that by now. Charles has been known to shout at his typewriter, if you can't believe that. We loaded very seriously, chewing on the stem of his pipe. Oh my, yes, it would be necessary to shout at one's typewriter. Now and then I would think, matching, or at least that kind of discipline occasionally. Just today I was shouting at my truck. Let's edit. Mom was smiling as the mention of a new skill in the crowd. It was good to see her relaxed and smiling the way she used to be for a change. How about your homework, Max? She asked. You're not disregarding the boundaries of your homework too, are you? I groaned, but I'm keeping up with school, same as always suddenly through algebra and American history. Seem pretty dull compared to other things that are happening. I regret when the team ends next month so that I can spend more time on photography. Molly will be completely well by 10 too, and things will be easier, and I will be able to see a lot of Ben and Maria. Will took me to meet them just after they moved in. Molly came too. I was surprised that she wanted to because she's been so miserable and self-consciousness about the way she looked that mostly she stays in her room. But when I asked her, she said, what the heck? There wasn't anything better to do. The three of us walked across the field on hot, sunny Saturday afternoon that smelled like new growing things. We could have gone down the road, of course, but it seemed like the shoot up day when walking across the field would be a nice thing to do while the flowers were just beginning to appear. They always take me by surprise. It seems each year as if winter will go on forever, even back in town. And when you resigned yourself to holy lifetime of grayness, suddenly bright bursts of yellow and purple and white spring up in the fields, and you realize they've been hiding there all along, waiting. Will was carrying a heavy stick that he sometimes used when he's walking, especially in the rocky fields. Rocky fields. He pointed here and there with the stick at the little blossoms in the field and the saddy butter of the woods as we walked along. And Mina, sorry for this restaurant or corners, Candice, Kasia. He said Molly and I glanced at him, grinned at each other, and didn't say anything. We went one pointing with his stick to a light yellow, tiny, bell-shaped flower. Can you say that 3 times fast? Asked Molly, laughing. Yes, grinned Will back at her. Suddenly I decided he was nearly putting us on. You're making all that out, Will. I hooted. You're big pony. You had me fooled for a minute, too. He looked down his nose at me in He shot away, but his eyes were twinkling. Then he pushed aside on the brush with his stick and pointed to the drop of small purple flower. By Ora. Pedeta. He said, talking to Molly, ignoring me. So cruel because the leaves resemble the foot of a bird. You believe me, don't you, Molly? Molly was laughing. The sun was shining through her thin hair, and for the first time since she'd been sick, there was color in her cheeks. I don't know for sure, Will. She smiled. I think I believe you, but the only white flower I recognize is goldenrod hinori. Sorry, Dago. It says very common around here, a remarkable plant, but we won't see it bloom until the end of July. In the meantime, you should investigate some of these hours more. It would keep you busy until you can go back to school, and it would be good for you being in the fresh air. Molly shrugged. She didn't like being reminded of her problem. We walked on. Ben and Maria were behind the house, starting a garden. They had a face of ground dug up, and Ben was standing in the middle of the turned earth, tapping at the lamp with a hoe. There was sweat all over his body back. He wasn't wearing anything but patchy jeans, and even though there was a handkerchief tied around his head, his hair and were wet with sweat too. He smiled when he saw us. Ah, Sabi us. He called, "You're coming to rescue me from this slave level, right?" Wang called the girl who was sitting in the grass at the corner of the garden path. "No excuse. I want to get my feet plenty high where." I burst out laughing. Will had told me very closely that there seems to be a baby coming that was on the treatment of the year. Sometimes I forgot that Will is 7 years old and that he's a little shy about something. Maria was so true, pregnant that I thought he would do well to start boiling water immediately. She was sitting with her leg crossed and her middle was resting on her legs. She was wearing a man's shirt with the sleeves lifted out. Her arms were broad and very tan, the same as her leg. The shirt was buttoned around her, but just barely. The middle bottom was pulled sideways by her stomach, and it was going to pop off very soon. I hoped she had a bigger chest ready. Either that or that the baby would be born before long. It looked like it was going to be a race between the baby and the bottom, and I didn't know enough about either pregnancy or the art of mending to be able to predict which was going to death itself first. Maria had one long dark body down her back and a smile that included all three of us as well as Ben, who was still leaning on his hoe. "I'd like you to meet my two friends, Meg and Molly." Charmers. Will said, "Meg is the photographer I've been telling you about, and Molly is the clear leader. But I'm going to try to turn her into a botanist." "Girls, this is when Brady and Maria." Maria reached up to shake our hands and said, Maria looked out of the corner of my eye. I could see where Francis slightly it all went right over Molly as she was so interested in the baby. "When it's the baby due?" asked Molly. "Do you mind my asking? I just love babies." From the garden, where we had started to hack at a flood of Irden, then obviously had locked in the mine. Mr. Oviban looked up and Cronk and rolled his eyes. "Does it mind your asking? Prepare yourself, Molly. You're an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of conversation. That's all she talked about. I remember a time. It was so long ago either. Come to think of it, when Maria and I used to talk about books, music, the weather, politics, the little things like that. Now we sit down in the evening after supper and we pour a couple cups of tea, put some bit on the solar and talk about this beer." She groaned, but he was looking at Maria affectionately. We were all laughing at Maria. She threw a handful of weed at him lightly and said, "Just want you know, Daddy, Molly, come in the house with me. I'll show you the crater I've been finishing." She got to her feet. And standing said, "Look," she smoothed the shirt over her middle so we could see how round she was. "It isn't due until July. Can you believe that? It's incredible how big I am, but I'm sure July is light. Do you know how you figure out your due date? It's really easy. You add 7 days to the date that your last period started." And I started talking quickly to Will because I could see how embarrassed he was by the conversation. Maria and Molly went in the house and then put down the whole. He showed Will and me how he had hurled rocks from the field to make a small wall beside the driveway, and the walk he'd been doing on the roof. He wandered around. Uh, you wonder around for a long time talking about what needed to be done to old house. Will explain how things had been when he was a child and then thought about how to make them that way again. We still finally buy a barrel patch of ours beside the kitchen door, and we'll describe the flowers that had been there once, how his grandmother had fixed her dishware there over the flowers, and they had grown bigger and here there than the other plants. Of course, that van, it probably had little scraps of bits of food, organic stuff in it. She was mulching the flower without even realizing it. That's cool. That's really cool. We should try that. I bet we could grow herb there. Maria's dying to have an herb garden. Parsley, sage, rose, summary, dim and dim. He sang off key. We looked somewhat non-pused by Maria the hurting, but he liked them. I could tell. I could tell. And he was happy about the house. I could tell that too. Maria made iced tea for everyone, and we went inside. The house was filled with as the ends of things, most of them with the faint part removed. Maria was busy finishing everything. There was an old spring wheel, and she said she was going to learn to spin the candle, which was almost finished, a rocking chair, powdered down with a pile of sandpaper on the seat, bands, typewriter, and books too, on a desk made from an old door, balances on two sawhorses. Will sat down in the ordinary chair, a bit comfortable, with its spring puffing out like milkweed from the pause in pour. Hope no one has. Hey, people, laughed Maria as Will sat down. Every time anyone sits in that chair, feather and dust fly all over the room, but I'm going to reupholster in after the baby's born. Ben groaned. She's gone mad, dear mad, he teased. I live on constant fear that some morning I'll wake up and find that she's and feared and fainted me in the night. Maria leaned over and examines his body foot. Come to think of it, she mused, that's not a bad idea. You could use a little walk. Then she leaned her head for a moment against his blue jeans leg, and he rubbed the top of her hair with his hand. I didn't say much. I was very happy being there. The sun had gotten lower in the sky, and as it came through the windows, it fell on Maria as she sat there on the floor leaned against Ben in gold patterns on her shoulder, and the thick bride of hair. I was making a photography in my mind, but Molly chatters and on. It was good to hear her. All the tenseness and anger were gone. She and Ben and Maria talked about what the inside of the house needed: hanging plants in the shiny windows, fresh white paint on the old plaster walls, just the right kind of sentence. I'll wave them myself, Maria exclaimed. Ben signed, smiled, and stroked her head on the way her Molly lags behind Will and me. She was gathering wild flowers, one of its kind, she said. She dressed them, and Will told her he would help her to identify its one, that he had a book she could use. You know, I said slowly to Will as we walked back through the field together. I wish I were more like Molly. I wish I knew the right things to say to people. Sometimes I seem to just sit there, Will said, and he put his arm around me as we walked. Do you see that section of the wood over there where the spruce tree is beside the bridges? Yes, I said, looking where he pointed, not far into the wood beyond the spruce. At the night time of year, there is a crowd of praying girls, Gentiles. Have you ever seen a flag extension? How do you like that? When I said something really serious, really personal for Pete's sake to my best friend, he wasn't even listening. We were still thinking about his friends. No, I told him a little sarcastic. I've never seen a flight like that. It will be up to you to move back to town, he said. It own room until the end of September, maybe even October. Oh, but I want you to come back so I can show it to you. Okay, I signed up. I didn't care about his old frightened. It's important, Mel. Will say, you promised. Well, if it was important to him, all right, I would want to come back anyway. And I didn't mind looking at his flower. Maybe he wanted to photograph it or something. I promised, Will, I said.